And now that we have a recording in progress, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, hello and welcome to the CTY Alumni Reflections and Future Visions. As I said already, my name is Emily Dolinsky, and I am the Senior Research Program Coordinator at the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. And CTY is very excited to offer these sessions to celebrate the 45th anniversary of CTY by highlighting our past, present, and future, as well as some of our recent research on advanced learners. So in this session, obviously, we will be focusing on CTY alumni, their reflections, and some future visions. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to the CTY Executive Director, Dr. Amy Shelton, for some opening remarks.
So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening, this afternoon, late at night, whatever time it happens to be where you are. We know we hit a lot of different time zones. I'm not going to talk for very long here because we've got a really important event. This is the third virtual event in our celebration of 45 years at CTY, and it's one that I've been anticipating from the start with a lot of great joy. Any chance to hear from alumni is exciting. It's always interesting. I learn a lot. It's great feedback for us. But it's also, we've assembled, as you might expect, a really impressive group of people here, a wide range of alumni. So in the interest of getting to the important part, I just wanted to say my welcome, and then I'm going to hand things over to Galen White. Galen has had many, many different roles at CTY, going back to working at sites in the 90s. And is currently serving as Senior Program Manager in our in-person experiences. So still heavy hand and a go-to person for our summer in-person programs. So again, huge welcome. Thank you for being here. And Galen, I'm going to let you take over.
All right. Good evening, CTY. As Amy said, my name is Galen White. I'm Assistant Director in our in-person experiences. And for those of you who go way, way back with us, I was a summer employee at the Dickinson College site from 1990 to 1996 as an RA, Senior RA, and Dean of Residential Life. But I am the least important person here. Our alumni are the most important, and so I'm going to quickly introduce them, and then we'll get to their thoughts on the CTY experience. First, Joe Bates was the first CTY student, going way, way back. And in our, before there was a CTY, there was Joe Bates. Joe is joining us, and he is currently the president of Singular Computing LLC. Also joining us is Lainey Rutko, who was a student at CTY 1990 through 93. And Lainey currently serves as the executive vice provost for Johns Hopkins University. Also, Dan Guido was a CTY student from 1998 through 2001. He is currently the CEO and co-founder of Trail of Bits, which is a cybersecurity firm dedicated to advancing security by boldly addressing technology's newest and most challenging risks through innovative research and practical solutions. He's an alumnus, a New York City alumni, volunteer, and an advocate and Champions Club member. Aubrey Stevens was a CTY student from 2004 to 2007, and Aubrey is currently manager of learning experience and excellence at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Finally, Venezia Garza, CTY student 2017 to 2022, was a senior at Princeton University, majoring in medical anthropology with a minor in Latino studies while pursuing the pre-medical track. She's a former advisory council associate member at CTY. So welcome to all of you to CTY. We've got a huge, we had basically the expanse of CTY experiences joining us tonight, from the very first days through practically our most recent summers. So thank you all for joining us. I want to quickly jump into the questions now. And first off is, how did CTY, and you all feel free to jump in, or if you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to call on you. How did CTY influence your academic trajectory, and also your career path? But I want to start with the academic trajectory, if that's okay with the group. Joe, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, before CTY, there was a research project called the Study of Mathematically Precocious Youth. And before that thing, there were several individuals that got admitted into Hopkins and I think other places young. And so I was the first one. I sometimes think of myself as a, laboratory mouse or something. It was definitely an experiment in a research project in the psych department at Hopkins. And so I just, I left eighth grade and went to Hopkins. And it was basically a wonderful thing for me, for who I was. So, of course, it was great intellectually. It was really exciting and interesting, but it was also really good emotionally and socially. Um, so it had a huge effect on my academic trajectory. It, was maybe the only interesting thing in my academic trajectory. And so it was great. I don't know if it influenced my career path because I loved computers and machines from when I was young. And even though some of you may be thinking they didn't have computers back then, but they did a bit. Um, so I think I would have done that anyway. But emotionally, socially, it was great, and academically, intellectually, it was great.
I can go next. Maybe we're going in order of years. So so Joe's first and I'm second. And Galen, before I answer your question, I wanted to say it's really an honor. I have such warm feelings about CTY. So to be with all of these alums and then Galen with you as moderator, especially because in my CTY days, you were and I think you still are a real legend and also someone that I remember as students we looked up to. Um, so on the academic side, for me, CTY, I mean, I was a good student, we're all good students, but CTY also helped me to realize that I could very intensively focus on something for just a couple of weeks, just 3 weeks, or I ended up doing both sessions of 6 weeks and learn an unbelievable amount of information. In my third summer, I took German 1 and German 2, and like I could speak in German at the end, and I did not know any German when I went into those classes. Um, and that also helped to foster what for me was a love of languages. And in college, I double majored, but one of them was comparative literature. And the exposure that I was able to get to humanities, not just languages, but also history and a number of other courses, I think it was really pivotal for me, and to see how engaging it would be, and to also feel like as a high schooler, I got this really cool experience of taking classes with individuals who taught at colleges and universities. And then if I quickly flip Galen to the second part of your question about my career, I don't think anyone when they're younger thinks to themselves, I want to grow up to be an executive vice provost. So it didn't do that. but it did give me exposure. I was at 3 different CTY sites over 4 years, and it gave me a sense of different types of what different types of colleges look like, feel like, and I think that early exposure was really helpful for me, not just in thinking about what I wanted to do when it was my turn to go to college, but also just a bigger appreciation for higher education.
Hey, I'll go. So I'm Dan. Uh, for me, I think it had a huge impact on my academics. When I was at my public high school on Long Island, they could hardly employ a computer science teacher, and that was the field that I was most interested in learning about. We managed to just barely cover some APCS stuff that was like how to manipulate a linked list, that kind of thing. But when I got to CTY, we learned the theory of computer science. I learned about computability theory and algorithms and logic and automata, and got this foundation of knowledge that I would never have been able to acquire if I was just studying from material I was presented at school. I think, like Lainey, it also taught me that my limits were, pretty high. That I could master the material in a short period of time as long as I threw myself at it. I think it's the only place where I really learned how to sort of self-study and how to figure out what techniques I could use to rapidly acquire all that knowledge. Um, And I think all this stuff came at the right time as well. So personally, for me, I took a lot of these courses when I was in seventh, eighth, ninth grade. I got afflicted by a chronic illness when I was late in my high school career, around 16, 17. And because I'd already developed the interest in computer science and I had the skills to do something with it, when I had to take a year off from high school, I had the opportunity to use that to my advantage and really dig deeper into that area of knowledge and come out of it really exceptionally strong. So I entered college and I was immediately useful to graduate students contributing to their research projects. I was immediately employable. I was connecting with other experts in my field because I got that leg up. So, and all of that, I'm lucky I was able to pick out what I wanted to do for my career when I was like 12. So all this stuff fed into my career as well.
I'll jump in. Unlike you, Dan, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was younger. And so I studied maybe the whole gamut. Just looking at the list that I have here, I started out by studying philosophy, and then I went to whodunit, and then I went to civic engagement and contemporary social issues. And finally, I finished up with medicine, East and West. That was a pretty awesome one in Nanjing. But the idea for me was that I had varied interests. But the common theme that CTY brought together for me was that I am a lifelong learner. And so the work that I do now is bringing learning and education to mechanical engineers to maintain their licensure. But I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing now if I didn't have the varied and diverse background that I had when I attended CTY. That gave me the chance to figure out what I did want to do. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to explore, to do it in a place that was safe, to be around smart people, to be around people that were kind and wanted similar things, wanted to learn something new and grow a community. And so that is how CTY has affected sort of my trajectory.
And I guess I can close us out here. I just want to second what Lainey mentioned earlier, that it feels so, so wonderful to be in this space with you all. As a now sort of slowly but surely aging alum, it's just so exciting to see how CTY has still had such a prolonged impact in the lives of alumni, from the very first one to now. And so for me, CTY was really a pivotal experience in sort of my academic trajectory. For context, I'm a first generation college student. I was also a part of the CTY Scholars Program, which provides first generation low income students with sort of college prep support through their high school years, and also helps fund 2 CTY residential experiences, of which I took part of in my 9th grade summer and 10th grade summer. And before going to a CTY sort of residential experience and being introduced to CTY in general, I had a very sort of limited view of what my academic abilities were truly capable of. I had never really had someone tell me that I could take the things that I was excited about and passionate about and just run wild with it. And so when I went to my first CTY residential program, I remember just being so in awe of my peers at how passionate they were about the things that they enjoyed, at how relentlessly they studied and they pursued these interests. And that for me was like, it was a really pivotal moment that shaped how I approached my learning from there on out. And that has shaped how I continue to approach my learning even today. So I think just being surrounded by other CTYers in that moment, and I think a moment as crucial as 9th grade and you're starting high school, was critical to how I approach my academics from there moving forward.
I'm curious. Aubrey brought this up, and I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but I remember a few years ago a CTY alum telling me, just sort of offhand, I was trying to drum up support, trying to figure out why more students weren't taking humanities courses at CTY. It's sort of been on the decline a little bit, and he said that when he was at CTY, and I remember this when he was on my hall, he took poetry. He said he always knew that he wanted to do. He would be studying math and computer science in college, later on in high school, and he viewed CTY as an opportunity to take classes that he knew he would never be taking otherwise. And I was wondering if anybody had moments during the course of their, either experience at CTY or really just any moment in your life where you were studying something that was not sort of aligned with your main interest, but you took it because it was interesting, you pursued it because you just felt it was something you wanted to look into a little bit more, and thought maybe you might not have another chance.
I'm happy to answer that, Galen, or to start off. So I'll give two examples. One was the very first class I took at CTY, was etymology, which I can genuinely tell you I didn't know what that was, but I think it was the only class that was helpful to me, given my age and the site that I wanted to go to. But I learned so much in those 3 weeks, including things that stayed with me through high school. Even now, sometimes when I'm looking at a word, I can still think back to what I learned that summer about the roots of words, the derivation of words. I happen to end up marrying someone who really likes thinking about that stuff just for fun. So even now, I will occasionally draw upon some old CTY knowledge that's back here. So that was just an unexpectedly fun intellectual experience. But the other one, from much later in my life, was when I was a grad student in public health. Galen, you asked about just like a sort of a class that you never thought. So I took, just for fun, this class that was called Introduction to Issues in Injury Prevention, which was not my thing, but it was a short-ish course. But that course exposed me to the idea of prevention policy. And up until I took that course, I thought a lot about health policy and sort of what happens once people are in the healthcare system. That course was what got me to first pull back and think more about prevention policy and thinking much more upstream. So how do we keep people from needing to go into the healthcare system at all? And that ultimately changed the trajectory of what I studied as a doctoral student.
I'd say I have a weird way to answer this question. I think that not taking a greater variety of courses is probably a regret of mine. Like I was at CAA once and CTY 3 times, had a fantastic time, but I never really went outside my lane. But I got exposed to a lot of really fun stuff that I was pretty jealous about from talking to other kids that were at camp with me. I developed a little social network, and you'd hear about some of the things that they were learning. And I kind of wish I had at least one course out of 4 that was a little bit offbeat. So if I could go back and do it again, I'd probably do that.
Okay. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
I have a question about your question. So,
Okay.
is your question, did you take courses that you were not, in fact, interested in? Or is your question, there were things you were interested in, but they were different from what you normally did? So you.
I think the second part, I probably was not elegant enough in my question formulation.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I think that the question of were there, I wish I had taken more natural sciences when I was in college, because what I know about the natural world is next to nothing, and it's sure to be useful these days. So I have that, along with Dan, just sort of thinking like, looking back, maybe that would have been a good thing or a nice thing to do.
I mean, I have an anti-answer.
Okay.
Which is when I was at Hopkins, which was my version of being at CTY. This was a long time ago, right? It was like the late 60s and 70s. And they were very flexible about how you could fulfill your requirements. And so I had, but there was a humanities requirement. But one option there was the philosophy department. And in the philosophy department, there were courses in, for instance, symbolic logic. So I fulfilled my humanities requirements by taking symbolic logic. And I was very grateful that Hopkins allowed that flexibility. So it's kind of maybe the opposite.
We have an ongoing internal debate as to whether or not our logic class should be a math class or a humanities class. So it's,
Yeah, both. It's
Yeah,
both.
there you go. And we're doing more of the either or eligibility stuff, because it really does things blur a lot more,
Yeah.
than or we recognize that things blur more than we used to, I think.
I
I
got
took
a
that
C
logic
in.
class in 91, and I remember pondering if it was a humanities
Yeah.
class or a math class.
Well, I know mine was a humanities course because I got it like a C minus. So
All right. Well, Dan mentioned the social circle, so I sort of want to transition a little bit. One of the things, students current and past tell us, the classes are great, but it's the people at CTY that make it so special. And I've if we don't have the classes, we don't exist, but the people are pretty awesome. So I'm wondering how the experience as an advanced learner, how did that impact your social life, building friendships, either in the program or again, outside of the program, but in your journey as an advanced learner and the peer group that you were finding.
I can kick us off with this one if
Okay.
that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds so cliche to say over and over, but it's true. It really is the people that make CTY the memorable experience that it is. My first summer I did it at Johns Hopkins at the Peabody Institute. I did the Civic Leadership Institute course, which was so special. I think particularly the second year I took a philosophy class here at Princeton actually, which ironically at the time I after the course said, oh no, I don't want to apply to Princeton. I didn't like the campus and here I am loving it every day, which I can talk more about later if that does come up. But in that Civic Leadership Institute course, I think it was unique in that there was sort of a community immersion part of the course that allowed for us to get to know each other both inside and outside the classroom in both social and professional settings. And I just remember feeling at 13 years old that I had never connected so quickly with the group of people in my life before. Um, I had friends, in elementary school and middle school, but I was certainly not the popular kid in my in my class. But it felt that way in CTY. It felt like I could just show up in any space, in any circle, start talking about something that I cared about, and inevitably there would be someone else who also cared about that thing or thought something different about it and would like spark a conversation. And I think one of my favorite things to do now, actually, is, and the story has a point, I promise, is after watching movies, I love discussing the movie and just unpacking the decisions the director made, the music, certain scenes, what I liked, what I didn't like. And I got that after doing a movie night with the girls on my CTY floor. And I forgot what movie it was. It must have been, it was some sort of action movie at the time. I don't remember what movie it was, but I just remember the part that I do remember really vividly was sitting in a circle in our little common room space afterwards and just talking about this movie for hours. And that was something that I didn't know that I was going to grow to love so much. I still have friends who I will see them, I think, as lifelong friends, one of which served as an associate council member alongside with me, Kimberly, who's incredible. Um, and it's just so, so wonderful to see the folks that you have so many fun, exciting memories with that you saw and in both these like professional sort of academic spaces and also these fun social dorm life spaces, now doing really incredible things in their futures. And so yeah, CTY definitely gave me some of those like lifelong friendships that and memories truly that I will never ever forget and always cherish because it's so hard now as I'm getting older, I find to find spaces where you can just connect in that way with folks. So I really appreciate it a lot.
I can follow after
Go
that.
for it.
And I echo many of those sentiments. For me, I was actually having a conversation with my dad. We were apple picking a couple weekends ago, and he was telling me about his experience of me going to CTY.
Hmm.
I went to CTY when I was about 14, so I was going into high school starting. But I was always a person who sort of bounced to the beat of her own drum. I was different and I knew it, and I didn't really have a problem with that. But I was also on the quieter side. I didn't necessarily hadn't found my voice, and I had friends, but I wasn't what you would consider the popular person. Very similar sentiment. But after my first summer going to CTY, my dad said that I came back basically a different person. And he meant that in the best possible way, in that I just came out of my shell. The person that I always was, I was now allowed to be authentically, because I finally found a space where people liked me being weird. My weirdness was cool, and my intellectual interests were also their interests. And so the following years, I planned my going back to CTY based on the friendships that I made. So I went back to a center to make sure that I can continue to build my relationships. And in fact, I was married about a year and a half ago, and I met my wife through a CTY friend. It would not have been possible without her. So, CTY really has been so impactful in my life socially. And my final point here is that I was recently diagnosed as being on the spectrum. That to me is something that I maybe always knew, but being a part of CTY allowed me to feel as though there was a space where I could fit in regardless of how I was showing up and regardless of how neurodiverse I was. I didn't even know that neurodiversity was a term at the time, but I always felt that I belonged when I was part of CTY. So I am so grateful to be a part of this community. It's helped me out immensely socially, and I know for a fact that it will have a similar impact on the future learners that are part of the program.
I just want to flip that around and say it in a different way. I think middle school and high school at a regular school, like at a random, public high school or whatever, is a hostile place for somebody that's motivated, gifted, or weird in some way, and that can stunt your growth. It can stunt your emotional, your social growth because you don't feel safe sharing or expressing the ideas and the interests that you have. And when everybody shows up at CTY, there is a sense of shared meaning or values. Like you're all there to master this 3-week course that you've decided to take. And a lot of the things that led you there are probably shared. The reasons why you ended up, and not somebody else at CTY. So it provides a real sense of safety that enables you to explore, a greater degree of social interactions that just don't come from where you probably came from. So I felt very safe, doing that. And I found a lot of peers that were, more than willing to engage me in all kinds of random ideas and interests. And it really told me that there was a world out there that, where there would be friends that I could make that I would be really happy to have.
I just want to second what Dan just said. It's so incredibly important, especially in those years. I can't generalize. I'll speak for myself. It was so important to me in those years um, to be among people who actually cared about thinking and learning. And for me, I wasn't ready to be a teenager, and I got to go to a place where I didn't have to be, and so it was just great. And I can't imagine being made to go to high school. I'm so glad I didn't have to. And CTY, obviously, I taught at CTY a bit also, and it was just clear that the students were most of them were overjoyed to be in that kind of setting. It's just so valuable for them.
Galen, maybe I can close this one out, and
Okay.
I'll share that I had forgotten about this until just now, but my senior prom date was a friend from CTY who crossed several state lines to join me for senior prom.
Was it someone from Dickinson? Was it someone I would remember?
Probably.
And I'll sort of just like add on. I remember coming back in 1995. I had been dean of residential life at the Dickinson site, and I went back to my parents' house, and I was showing them the VHS tape. Look it up, younger alumni, of the talent show. We had recorded it. We had gotten a camera from Dickinson, and one of my sisters was there. My parents were there, and they looked at it and said, "These kids are so confident." And the fact that they're able to get up in front of all of these yelling and screaming, peers of theirs and sing, dance, do stand up, reenact Monty Python skits, they were sort of amazed at the poise that the students were showing in that setting. And I remember the number of parents who have talked to me over the years and kids I've been able to see from summer to summer sort of developing their first year that they don't know how to pack to go home, and then by the end, they're golden. They're amazing. They're on the I don't want to say top of the heap because we don't do hierarchy at CTY. But they're so confident, and they're so they know who they are. And that's sort of one of the amazing things to watch. Sort of for those of us who get the sort of longer view. Or the outside looking in a little bit on the student experience. At this point, we've had a couple of questions coming in, it looks like, from the chat. So I was wondering, Emily, can you tell us what the people who are listening in are curious to know?